Thank you.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to begin, of course, by acknowledging we're on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I did have a question for the Minister, which I was unable to get in, but perhaps I can work it into my speech. I also want to start, because I'm sure the people watching today's debate in the Canadian House of Commons, that many of them will be from Indonesia, interested in what Canadian parliamentarians think about their country and this trade agreement. So I do want to start by expressing deep condolences to the people of Indonesia who just last weekend experienced an extreme weather event, likely due to climate change because of the extreme rainfall event that caused landslides. At this point, those landslides in West Java have killed at least 20 people, and there are dozens still missing. So we're aware of the difficult time being faced right now by local governments and communities, including naval officials who are still stuck due to the landslides. It's a horrific event. But that brings me, Madam Speaker, to the question I was going to ask the Minister, but I think I'll start by prefacing my speech with this question, because we have before us a bill that would appear to be an opportunity for the House of Commons to either agree and ratify a treaty or not. I think as a matter of law that this treaty likely was considered by both Canada and Indonesia to have come into force when the Prime Minister and the leadership in Indonesia signed the agreement back in September of 2025. So I think this is somewhat pro forma, which is troubling. In Canada, which a lot of Canadians wouldn't know, each government, each executive, Prime Minister and Cabinet has a choice. Do you bring a treaty to Parliament for debate and vote, or does it get passed solely in Cabinet by Governor and Council? And then later, such as in this case, the agreement was signed, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between Canada and Indonesia was signed before it ever came to Parliament. We're now debating and considering an act to implement the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So it's kind of a hybrid here. In the past, we've had many treaties where a Prime Minister has decided this is so important that we're going to debate it on the floor of the House of Commons and let Parliament vote. So let me contrast two with which I'm very familiar. One was the time that former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien felt that it was really important for Canada's Parliament as a whole to debate and vote on the Kyoto Protocol back in 1997, the first of many legally binding climate negotiations that were concluded. After that, another example, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper decided the Canadian Parliament didn't need to debate or vote on a very dangerous agreement, which was in the end concluded only by a vote in Cabinet, by an order in Council. And that relates to the context of what I'm going to continue to speak about here today. That was the Canada-China Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Agreement, or FIPA, which never was debated in Parliament, but was only carried through the Governor and Council, and allows for, to this day, secret hearings if the People's Republic of China objects to any change in a regulation or rule or by a local government, provincial government, whatever. We can then be sued for whatever amount basically the Politburo of People's Republic of China, because so many of their enterprises are state-owned. In any case, the FIPA with China never came before Parliament. So each government has the option, each federal government, of concluding any treaty with a foreign power either through Cabinet alone or through bringing it to Parliament for a vote. In this case, I'm afraid that this is probably already a legally binding treaty with Indonesia before we've discussed it here, but this is the Implementation Act to bring it forward. It's very much the case that the Green Party agrees with the goals of the current government, that we need trade diversification. But we would prefer far more effort to ensure that those agreements we make are with strong democracies that share our values. In this, I can now quote her in this place because she's no longer a member, but former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland put it this way, quote, "Democracies should depend on democracies, not dictators," unquote. Even in times when we need more trade agreements, more trade diversification, less reliance on the United States, no question. We should look at with whom we're climbing into bed on these issues. I'm concerned, Madam Speaker, about the fact, and it is true, Indonesia is a democracy, but it may be a democracy in name only. According to the Economist's investigation unit, intelligence unit, they have for years marked Indonesia down as a flawed democracy. There are many issues, such as were already raised by my friend and colleague from the Bloc Québécois, about human rights within Indonesia, the fraying of that relationship between a real democracy where the people really decide what the policies are, really control their government. There are many democracies around the world where people may think that may not be the case. In any case, Indonesia still, on paper, is a democracy. But when we look at this agreement, and I do want to focus on one specific area and one specific company, we have had a lot of trade with Indonesia already, and I question whether it's been to our benefit and whether we shouldn't have reviewed some of these trade arrangements more closely. I speak, of course, of the fact, which is astonishing for most Canadians, that the largest of our pulp and paper enterprises across Canada is a company that's basically controlled in Indonesia. It is called Paper Excellence, and over the years, first it started by buying Northern Pulp in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Then it has absorbed Domtar and Resolute and Catalyst. It controls a vast amount of Canadian forest, and it runs pulp and paper mills across Canada. Now, by this agreement, we are now giving the same thing I mentioned earlier, the Foreign Protection Promotion Agreement for Investments. That would mean the government of Indonesia can complain and go to arbitration if we change our rules or laws as affect their investments. This is a very strange situation. I know the Standing Committee on Natural Resources subpoenaed the leadership of Paper Excellence to come before the committee to explain what they were doing with our pulp and paper industry, with our vast area of forest that they now control. The entire corporation is controlled by one Indonesian billionaire, Mr. Wijawa refused to come before the committee and sent some representatives. The company on paper is registered in Vancouver, but this is, again, there's no transparency. It's not listed on any stock exchange. It is the sole property of one individual billionaire. And by this agreement, which I think is already signed and in law, we have now given investment protection and the ability to go to an investor-state dispute resolution to complain if a Canadian province decides this was a mistake to let an Indonesian multinational buy up Domtar, Resolute, Catalyst, or Northern Pulp, and we now wish to protect our forests, protect our forest workers, and put in place more protections. I did hear the minister's answer that this agreement does maintain that we're going to seek sustainable development, that we're going to promote the environment, promote fair labor standards, but we're dealing with a country where those things are rather unknown, and it's not clear to me how, in passing C-18, we will get to where we want to go. In terms of the promised new day and how much this is going to deliver for Canadians, the estimate is that this will increase Canada's GDP by 2040 by 0.012%. Again, we do want to diversify trade, but we do want to be careful. I look forward to this bill going to committee on second reading where we can pursue some of these questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I always listen intently when a member from Saanich Gulf speaks in this chamber. She opened the door on trading with democracies. She mentioned China by name. I wondered if she would offer an opinion on the Prime Minister's recent deal, if you want to call it a deal, or agreement with the CCP.
Honourable member for Sandwich School Violence.
Thank you, my honourable friend from Simcoe North. Yes, I'm deeply concerned if we jettison human rights in an effort to get trade deals. There's a price we pay. I do think we need strengthened diplomatic relationships with the People's Republic of China, but I don't forget what happened to the two Michaels, and I don't forget where we stand for the Uyghurs and other human rights and the people of Tibet and.
Questions and comments. General Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, so thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's important when we take a look at C-16 that we put it in the perspective of a commitment and election platform that the Liberal Party presented to Canadians. We have to take a look in terms of the whole issue between the relationship between Canada and the USA and how critically important it is, without abandoning our values or anything of that nature, but looking at ways in which we can increase export opportunities for businesses of all sizes here in Canada, and to see additional investment where we can get that investment, again, without abandoning principles or values that Canadians have. And this is a piece of legislation that ultimately continues to advance an important issue of trade. And my question to the member is related to, when you put it in the perspective of Canada makes up 0.5% of the population of the world, yet we participate in 2.5% of world trade. If I can just get the member, the leader of the Green Party's overall position on trade.
The Honourable Member for Sandwich School Violence.
Well, thanks to the Parliamentary Secretary. We favor trade, particularly fair trade, rooted in Canadian values that extends to particularly prioritizes Canadian-owned businesses and enterprises, a Canada First policy that helps get our products first sold across interprovincial barriers and exported to the world. We need to link arms with other democracies that defend human rights.